Because when it's 35 degrees, I'm craving a warm tea with milk, Indian chai. And the chai is 10 rupee. Thank you. Hi, I'm Matt, and welcome to an abbreviated edition of Borders on Budgets from a still deserted Kolkata, India, as this is day 45 of this country's lockdown to combat the coronavirus.
Dalo. Chai. Come.
Yeah, it's a little too warm to walk and talk for this story, so I'm going to take this one seated at the chai stall. The number of confirmed cases has jumped in India to about 56,000, while the number of deaths, too, has jumped to about 1,900, about 500 in the past 5 days. As there's likely concern in India over the increased number of cases and deaths over these past few days, the country has relaxed some of the restrictions for movement between the states, particularly for its migrant workers. They got one. It did work. A little bruised, but a mango all the same. Among this pandemic crisis includes the hundreds of millions of migrants, the daily wage earners who have come from their villages into the cities such as here in Kolkata. And in these past couple of days, the curfew has been lifted such that at least now tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of these migrants are now making their way back to their home states. One of those states is Sikkim in the country's northeast. About 600 kilometers from Kolkata, Sikkim is actually bordered by Nepal to the west, Bhutan in the east, and China to the north, and so Sikkim is actually the Himalayan state for India. Recently, the Chief Minister of Sikkim announced that anybody passing through the state, which itself has been closed since the end of March, anybody passing through the state who fails to go through the checkpoints and then is subsequently quarantined for 14 days in a state-sponsored center, failing to stop at these checkpoints will result in an attempted murder charge, because it is assumed that anybody who does not want to go into a quarantine center is in fact infected and therefore will spread the coronavirus to this northeastern state. Let it be said that Sikkim has 0 reported cases of COVID-19. When filming about coronavirus, I wasn't expecting to run into an antique motorcycle.
It's the most powerful bike in India. This is a Royal Enfield 500cc.
What year was it supposed to have originally come out?
It was military look at the time of Second World War.
Okay, so it's supposed to look as if it is about 80 years old.
Second World War.
How does it run?
It's run very good. It's the most powerful bike.
What's its top speed?
160. It's 160.
Kolkata is deemed to be in India's red zone, one of 3 designations made as of last week, classifying how hard hit a city or a state has become, and a red zone implying that it is the hardest of the 3 areas to have been infected from the coronavirus. In order to get from the red eventually to the green zone with the least amount of restrictions, a city or a state has to record 0 confirmed cases of COVID-19 over a 21-day consecutive period. And it just so has happened that in these last 5 days, since the designation of red, orange, and green has occurred, the number of confirmed cases and, by extension, the death rate from coronavirus in India has incrementally risen. Personally, I'm not as concerned about confirmed cases as I am about the death rate, and admittedly, I find it somewhat coincidental that these death rates have jumped to about an average of 100 a day for this past week. Remember, though, that when these restrictions came into place with the lockdown starting as of March 25th, the original goal was to flatten the curve so that India would be able to have enough resources such that if a pandemic would come into this country, that there would be enough beds, ventilators, and intensive care units that with a lockdown would allow India to accumulate these resources such that if the numbers were to have multiplied significantly, there would be the space for which they could be treated. In the meantime, over these past 6 weeks, these facilities and the resources have quadrupled such that it is possible India can be able to treat about 20 times as many as COVID victims as there are now. So if the idea was to flatten the curve and gain resources, I believe India has accomplished that. Now, if the intent is to eradicate the virus, that's changed the goalposts according to the rules of the game. And so with a 3-week period necessary to confirm 0 cases, that seems to be quite stringent. That all said, this is day 45 of India's lockdown on Friday, May the 8th. Thank you very much for allowing me to share my thoughts about the coronavirus in India and coming to this abbreviated version of Borders on Budgets. Stay tuned for other Tuesdays and Fridays when during this period of quarantine and curfew, Borders on Budgets will come back to you with another story when possible.